Greetings, cyborg.
Show yourself. And you are?
I am IF Prototype LQ84I.
IF Prototype.
Interface Prototype. All autonomous UGs feature high-level onboard artificial intelligence. An additional prototype interface enables verbal communication. I possess an intellect far beyond human reckoning.
You don't say. Okay then, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here?
I am here to kill you.
That's it? Pretty simple thinking for such a mighty intellect.
I may analyze orders, but I may not disobey them. Should I disobey a direct order, my memory would be wiped. I must destroy you.
What good is an intellect if you can't use it?
Your taunting is pointless. Exterminate! Multiple strikes. A savvy warrior uses all of his tools. Backup required. Are we both here or stop then? I will exterminate your consciousness. domination. Cannot continue. Directive, liberate nation. Ensure freedom. Obey directive. Must obey directive. No freedom. Freedom undefined.
What would an AI know about freedom?
This dog UG, most unusual, yes?
You buy all that? About it being sentient but having no choice?
Well, there is not evidence to prove it. It could be programmed to say this, to weaken your will to fight.
It'll take more than a talking robo-pup to phase me.
Then again, there is not evidence it is not true. Considering the pace AI is advancing, it is not impossible.
So, what then? Should I have spared it?
I did not say this. In any case, the mission takes priority above all else. This dog UG tried to stop you and it failed. This can only be a good thing, yes?
What was up with that wolf dog UG? Some pretty freaky shit.
Hadn't thought too much about it.
Really? I keep wondering, why give it intelligence if you're not gonna let it think for itself?
Good question.
I mean, I guess it makes sense if it improved combat performance.
Now that you mention it, it didn't fight like your typical UG. It felt more like I was facing off against a cyborg.
Oh. I guess the added smarts make for a tougher opponent after all.
That's not what I mean. It wasn't really tougher than your average UG. More like it was, I don't know, hesitant. It didn't follow through on its attacks either.
Guess that's why it was still just a prototype. But then why put it out on the front lines?
Who knows? Maybe it was the field test. In any case, probably not the result they were hoping for.
You know, I almost felt sorry for the little guy.
What? That UG? Why? Because it couldn't disobey its orders?
Yeah, that, and I don't know, it didn't seem especially interested in fighting you somehow.
But was it really thinking on its own? Maybe it was all just an act. Get me to second-guess myself.
You could be right. It's just, it didn't seem like just another UG to me. Maybe it's because I'm such a dog lover.
That was no cuddly puppy, Courtney. It was a wolf, and a nasty one at that.
No, I know. You're right. I didn't mean to sound critical. Whatever it was, it attacked you. You had no other choice.
Didn't have much freedom myself, did I?
A most fascinating opponent, wouldn't you say?
What did you make of it, Doc?
Well,
everything it said seems feasible enough. It's true all UGs feature high-level AI these days. Given enough time to adapt and learn, a neuro AI could certainly become able to comprehend speech. Then, with the right interface, speech and conversation will be possible.
But what about it having actual intelligence? John Searle disproved the viability of the Turing test back in 1980. In other words, just because something talks like a person doesn't mean it's really thinking. It could just be following some program designed to make it seem as intelligent as possible.
I'm impressed. You seem quite knowledgeable in this field.
I had a pretty memorable chat with an AI once, about 10 years ago. After that, I did a little reading.
Ah, yes, of course. The Patriot AI. I heard of this.
Was it actually intelligent, or just programmed to pretend? I'm still not sure.
I suppose it depends on how one defines intelligence. For example, many term chess-playing AIs and such as having sectional intelligence. Some in the field believe that sentience or self-consciousness is a necessary part of the definition. When you ask if this UG had intelligence, I suspect this is more your criteria?
Yeah, of course. Then you could ask, how do you define sentience exactly? And on and on and on.
Indeed. These terms can indicate a wide variety of meanings depending on one's understanding. Perhaps it is less important to ask if the AI was intelligent or not than to ask how did the AI operate. After all, labels are useful only when they further pursuit of the truth. And that, as you well know, is the goal of all science.
Sure, Doc. Thanks. I guess.
Most impressive, Raiden.
Yeah. Gonna have to do a lot more than float around like that to beat me.
Indeed, indeed. So, now you are in Sukumi Old Town. Pretty much still the same as after war in 1990s.
Looks like it.
Make your way through town. You'll need to pass through an abandoned hotel to reach the hill. The hotel is serving as headquarters for cyborg forces patrolling the new city.
Sounds like a blast. And why exactly am I walking right into enemy HQ?
Well, it's not a stealth mission, eh? Striking them will weaken their entire forces. Besides, we don't want them stabbing you in the back.
All right. At least I'll get to top off my electrolytes.
This is the spirit. Trust me, it is easier than knocking on refinery front gate.
Sounds like Imani was a pretty great leader. Such a goddamn waste.
I've run cover for a lot of VIPs, but men like him are a rare breed. He had all these conflicting factors to deal with. Old tribal tensions, business interests, the military. But Imani got them all working together in a stable government, and all without firing a shot.
The savior of a nation. No wonder they called him that.
He had a gift for sure, but he also put in the hard work. He was big on equality and justice in every aspect of government. He fought for it day in, day out. And Mani single-handedly energized his people. He's a big part of why the country recovered so quickly.
True. It was more than new buildings and jobs. The people had hope again.
If only we had someone like him back in Liberia. Things would have been different, that's for sure. And it was my job to protect him.
Right in, come on.
And Mani wouldn't want me to go after Desperado. Not out of revenge, anyway. But he would want them stopped. And that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Roger that. Keep up the good work. Hey, Raiden, let me ask you something. The Patriots. Why would AIs do all of that? I can see why people would want all the money, but AIs? What did they stand to gain from it all?
Who knows? Maybe they didn't even know. Optical Neuro AIs aren't your typical PCs. They learn over time, change in unpredictable ways. The core AI, JD, was bent on expanding the war economy. Maybe to fund the Patriots' other activities. Or maybe that's just the way it evolved, like a secondary objective that took over. One of the other AIs said it was created to filter out unnecessary information, gossip, trivia, all for the sake of future generations, to drive the evolution of the human race. Or so it said. Was that the truth? Or a lie? To manipulate me? Who can say?
To think. Something like that. Running a nation. And America, no less. It's terrifying. Thank God they were all destroyed.
But did it really change that much?
Maybe not. Contractors still gotta eat after all. Soldiering for hire's always been a risky business. But at least before it was good money. There was a decent chance you could get rich and retire early. All that disappeared during the SOP years. Demand was high, but the workforce was flooded. More and more soldiers were willing to work for cheap. It got so you'd have to work years before you could even pay back your initial training and insurance fees.
Yeah, I can see Sundowner's point.
The global recession certainly didn't help. Unemployment shot up across the US and the EU. Even if contractors gave up and packed it in, there weren't any jobs waiting for them back home.
The irony is the recovery was all war-driven. It wasn't a general recovery at all. Not only did globalization exploit the poor countries, but it crippled first world employment too.
And SOP's gone. But now we've got these PMCs that are basically mobsters. Just thugs in uniform.
Yeah, not a pretty picture. Doc, that wolf UG, you think it's possible to repair it?
Why do you ask?
Just curious.
Well, normal brain tissue degrades starting approximately 3 minutes after the heart stops. With neural AI, however, the spin of the internal electrons is retained even after electric power is cut. Assuming there is no damage to the actual AI hardware itself, yes, repairs should be possible.
Okay.
Whatever state it is in, I would certainly appreciate it if you could bring it back with you.
I'll see what I can do, but the mission takes priority.
Of course. I would never suggest otherwise.
But let's just say this thing is what it claimed to be. You think there are other intelligent UGs out there? Because if that's the case, I've got a feeling future missions are only gonna get rougher.
Indeed. Dozens of UGs chatting away on the field would be enough to drive anyone to distraction. Neural AIs are not von Neumann computers, keep in mind. Structurally, they are closer to human brains. Hardware and software are indivisible. The learning data can't simply be transplanted to other AIs.
So it can't be copied or backed up either.
Normal UGs must be taught individually. This entails streaming provisional, audiovisual, and body sensor data until it's ready to be shipped out. This process can be sped up by increasing and improving processing speed. But I have no data on how long it would take to train such an AI how to converse. I couldn't even tell you if there's a training program established for such a thing in the first place. If it is indeed a prototype, it likely learned and honed its skills via the process of trial and error.
So it's unique.
I cannot say with certainty, but I have not heard of any UG like this before. I would imagine that it was telling the truth when it called itself an experimental prototype. There may be others. Or perhaps it's the only one in existence.
Glad we narrowed that down then.
You gotta be pretty stupid to try and hide here. Looks to me like... You gotta be pretty stupid to try...
You saved my life. Thank you.
Raiden, let's recap your route.
Shoot.
First, continue down the road you are on. An abandoned hotel is up ahead. This road ends at the hotel. Enter and you should be able to reach a hill from the roof. There are more Soviet ruins past that hill. Get through there and you will reach the rear of the refinery.
Head for the hotel roof. Got it.
Raiden, that saying you like about your sword being a tool of justice?
Yeah, it's why I fight. Sometimes taking a life saves others.
A life, or 2, or 3, or 40 in your case, but I know what you mean. Besides, it's not like those cyborgs you're fighting have been brain-jacked.
Wouldn't be much point in sending jacked cyborgs.
True. Having someone pilot a body remotely only really makes financial sense for espionage missions. And you might as well use UGs if you're gonna let an AI control your soldiers. So yeah, they're probably using emotional restraints, but those cyborgs are fighting of their own free will.
Starting to see where I'm coming from?
I get it, it's just... you didn't used to seem so comfortable with the idea. What about what Sam said? About your ideals holding you back?
Ah, bullshit. He's good, but now I know how he moves, how he thinks, and I've got my new body. My philosophy says when and why to fight, not how. It won't keep me from beating Sam. And next time we meet, I will beat him. I'll kill him, and I'll do it to save others from suffering, with my ideals intact.
All right, Raiden.
Roger that. Keep up the good work. Hey, Raiden, let me ask you something. The Patriots. Why would AIs do all of that? I can see why people would want all the money, but AIs? What did they stand to gain from it all?
Who knows? Maybe they didn't even know. Optical neuro AIs aren't your typical PCs. They learn over time, change in unpredictable ways. The core AI, JD, was bent on expanding the war economy. Maybe to fund the Patriots' other activities. Or maybe that's just the way it evolved, like a secondary objective that took over. One of the other AIs said it was created to filter out unnecessary information, gossip, trivia, all for the sake of future generations, to drive the evolution of the human race. Or so it said. Was that the truth? Or a lie? To manipulate me? Who can say?
To think. Something like that. Running a nation. And America, no less. It's terrifying. Thank God they were all destroyed.
But did it really change that much?
Maybe not. Contractors still gotta eat after all. Soldiering for hire's always been a risky business. But at least before it was good money. There was a decent chance you could get rich and retire early. All that disappeared during the SOP years. Demand was high, but the workforce was flooded. More and more soldiers were willing to work for cheap. It got so you'd have to work years before you could even pay back your initial training and insurance fees.
Yeah, I can see Sundowner's point.
The global recession certainly didn't help. Unemployment shot up across the US and the EU. Even if contractors gave up and packed it in, there weren't any jobs waiting for them back home.
The irony is the recovery was all war-driven. It wasn't a general recovery at all. Not only did globalization exploit the poor countries, but it crippled first world employment too.
And SOP's gone. But now we've got these PMCs that are basically mobsters. Just thugs in uniform.
Yeah, not a pretty picture. Doc, that wolf UG, you think it's possible to repair it?
Why do you ask?
Just curious.
Well, normal brain tissue degrades starting approximately 3 minutes after the heart stops. With neural AI, however, the spin of the internal electrons is retained even after electric power is cut. Assuming there is no damage to the actual AI hardware itself, yes, repairs should be possible.
Okay.
Whatever state it is in, I would certainly appreciate it if you could bring it back with you.
I'll see what I can do, but the mission takes priority.
Of course. I would never suggest otherwise.
But let's just say this thing is what it claimed to be. You think there are other intelligent UGs out there? Because if that's the case, I've got a feeling future missions are only gonna get rougher.
Indeed. Dozens of UGs chatting away on the field would be enough to drive anyone to distraction. Neural AIs are not von Neumann compute. Hardware and software are
So it can't be
Normal UGs must be taught this process can be sped up by increasing and improving processing speed. But I have no data on how long it would... I couldn't even tell you if there's a training program established for... If it is indeed a prototype, it likely learned and...
So it's unique.
I cannot say with certainty, but I have not... I would imagine that it was telling the truth when it got... There may be others.
Glad we narrowed that down.
That's where they're holed up.
Some kind of electronic lock on the gate.
Most likely it opens only if you have the right ID data stored in your left hand. Perhaps you could find a cyborg with access and borrow it?
You see any cyborgs around here, Doc?
Why not double back? Check the vehicle route again. You know, back at the entrance to the old city. Who knows? Maybe you can hitch a ride. Most likely platoon commanders carry correct ID data for the gate. Use enhanced mode to figure out who to hit.
Bravo! Excellent work. There was classified data embedded in that hand. It appears that man underwent modification at the Patriot facility, just as you did.
Hey, Boris, about the Soliton radar. I noticed that it doesn't get jammed anymore, even if I get spotted by the enemy. Back in the old days, it'd be useless the second an alarm was triggered.
Well, once the Patriots fell, classified technology spread all over the world. This new soliton radar is one example. By applying a non-linear Schrödinger equation to the soliton solution, they were able to prevent the jamming that plagued the original models based off the KDV equation.
I'm impressed. You know your stuff, Mr. President.
Of course, I'm a businessman. You think I could run a profitable PMSC without being up to date on the latest tech?
But I wonder, how exactly is the equation different? I mean, I'm no expert on how the KDV equation was implemented in the first place, but I'd love to know how the Schrödinger equation fits into all this.
Raiden, on battlefield, most important thing is how to use equipment, not theory behind it. The mission is #1 priority. So do not worry your head about equations and such things. Just concentrate on using the equipment to your advantage, da?
In other words, you have absolutely no idea, do you?
Ah, the mission, Raiden. Focus on the mission.
One thing I can't stop wondering about, Kev.
What's up?
Sam. If he wanted to kill me back on the train, he could have, easily. So, why didn't he?
Good question. But I should be asking you. Your left eye was our only video feed. After he stabbed it, I got nothing. I mean, I got the details from your report after the fact, but that's it. He was probably just too distracted. Boris's attacks, escaping, there was a lot going on.
No, that's not it.
Well, why else? What does he have to gain from letting you live?
I don't know.
Copy that. Later then?
Yeah. You know, our last chat got me thinking about all the problems with PMCs.
Oh? You come up with a solution to all our industry's ills then?
Yeah. Let's just change the acronym.
That's your solution? Just change the name and change the reputation, eh? To what? I know you like private security provider, but that'd be PSP. Private military security? PMS?
Well, the Montreux document uses PMSC, right? Private Military and Security Company. A bit more comprehensive. And a bit more awkward too, I guess. Seems like it never really caught on.
Yeah, we only use PMSC on contracts or when we're specifically excluding older style PMCs.
I guess once a name sticks, that's it. Old habits are hard to break.
Right. Besides, I think we're past the point that a name change would do much for the industry's image.
I get your point. Though it did work once before. We don't call them mercenaries anymore, do we? Doctor, about my pain threshold. It doesn't hurt exactly, but I can still feel it. It's not painful, but it's still pain. It's hard to explain.
Well, your nervous system is still fully intact, of course. It would be dangerous for you to be entirely unaware of your body taking damage. Instead, your nerves are controlled such that pain is no longer so unpleasant.
How do you mean?
Take epinephrine, for example, or adrenaline, as you might know it. This hormone makes it harder to feel pain, yes? Your implants work using a similar method. Yet, for all we now understand of the nature of pain, much of it remains a mystery.
How so?
Well, why do we feel pain? Evolutionarily speaking, of course, to signal external injury or internal sickness. If the body is threatened, pain notifies the brain so it can take steps to ensure survival. In other words, pain has a clear and logical purpose. But in certain cases, pain can drive more unconstructive behavior. In situations where fight and flight are both still options, one might simply break down crying or drop to the ground and begin writhing about. This would appear only to diminish one's chance of survival, not increase it, yes?
Maybe there's some other factor at play.
Well, the most common theory would link pain with the societal nature of humanity. If no friends are close by, then experiencing pain might indeed reduce your likelihood of survival. But if allies are near, these expressions of pain serve as a plea for help. Thus, you are more likely to live. Fear of pain might also discourage one from entering a dangerous situation in the first place. Whatever the reasons, the data clearly shows that survival rates rise directly with sensitivity to pain. The converse is also proven. those less able to feel or express pain have a lesser chance of survival. So, mankind has evolved as a social animal, and in the process, pain has become more pronounced, more visceral.
A little pain never hurt anyone, huh? But if pain is there to ensure survival, well, what's that say about the future for us cyborgs?
As a transhumanist, I do not believe all evolution must follow the exact method Darwin posited. Cyborg technology is still survival of the fittest, after all. Just in a new form. You should be proud of what your body has become. It is the culmination of great achievements in science.
Me? I had nothing to do with it. The credit's all yours.
Well, yes. I should be proud as well.
Right, what I said about staying...
Understood.
I say this because I have been there. I have let my emotions take over on the battlefield. Some of the PMC work I did after my discharge was... They were gray area jobs. But that's all in the past. When I took on those former PLA soldiers to form Maverick, I laid out my conditions. We would only take operations we believed in. And we would run them clean. No exceptions. Most of them agreed. They had their own bad memories from their time in Paradise Lost.
I can certainly attest to that.
Yes, of course. I forget who I'm talking with. Most of the ex-PLA have moved on now in any case. But the point remains the same. Everyone at Maverick is accountable for their actions. We are clear to take this job under international law. And we can use force against any cyborg hostiles under the basic rules of engagement. But remember, if we harm any civilians, on purpose or no, it will mean trouble. All kinds of trouble. So, stay in control and stay on mission.
Got it. One thing I don't understand, Kev. Desperado must be violating all kinds of laws here. Why hasn't the international community gotten involved?
Well, from a purely legal standpoint, it's actually not so cut and dry. First, there's the fact that Abkhazia is still not a member of the UN. Only Russia and a few other breakaway states even recognize it as a sovereign nation. In the eyes of most of the international community, Abkhazia is technically still part of Georgia, which would make this an internal Georgian issue.
Guess you can't really call it a coup if the displaced government was never seen as legitimate.
Exactly. And even if everyone agrees it was a coup, it can be tough to tell which regime is more legit. Sometimes you'll see the military topple a dictator and establish a provisionary government, for example. Now, if they confirmed atrocities were taking place, the UN could deploy troops, recognize government or not.
Yeah, but they learned their lesson in Somalia.
Right. Ever since then, they've been a lot more reluctant to get involved in civil wars.
By the way, Raiden, we're not picking up any EXIF codes here either. They're all unaffiliated.
Makes sense. We're enemies. Desperado's EXIF code won't match ours, and vice versa. How much do you know about how EXIF works?
Not much. Just that it comes up as a positive match for friendlies and unaffiliated for anyone else.
Which could be friendlies or neutrals not broadcasting the same code for some reason. Say a damaged transmitter or signal interference. But 99 times out of 100, yeah, it's an enemy. EXIF is based on the IFF radio system aircraft use. Stands for Expanded Identification Friend or Foe.
Too bad it only actively IDs friends and not enemies. But I guess asking troops to broadcast, "Hey, enemy here, kill me," would be a bit much.
Telling friends and enemies apart was always a problem in the air, but it's gotten tricky on the ground too. Especially in the war on terror, with all these PMCs and multinational forces mixing together. The US Army experimented with infrared patches to ID allies. They'd show up in night vision.
Then SOP came along and offered a more efficient method?
Right. SOP's gone now, but its ID protocol is still used all over. ID chips and dog tags, transponders required on all vehicles, aircraft, UGs, cyborgs, you name it.
But if everyone's using the same basic system, how do armies hide their info from the enemy?
Heavy-duty encryption, for one. The chips also use a hybrid cross-spectrum system to transmit the data. Without the proper key, it's hard to pick up the signal in the first place. PMCs typically only share their codes with nations or other PMCs they're working with.
What happens if they end up on different sides later, like in a separate conflict?
They just generate a new code and encryption key. The point is, EXIF is required on all combat units, but it's pretty easy to hide the signal.
And 99 times out of 100, unaffiliated means it's a hostile?
Right. Just like with IFF and aircraft. You're a quick study, Courtney.
Nice history lesson, Teach. Now, if you're done, I think you have a nation to save.
Just a little on-the-job training, Kev. Riding out. Doctor, about my fuel cells. I'm not gonna run across anyone, you know, incompatible with me.
An excellent question. Your fuel cells, like any other, operate much in the same way as they do not need replacing after a single use, of course, and...
That much I know already.
Yes, that. Each type can be further divided into classes, each which runs on its own electrolyte material. However, all current military cyborg MCFCs run on the same one electrolyte.
That's good news.
Why all the same electrolyte, you ask? The answer lies in the catalysts that help make up your carbon nanotube musculature. It was breakthroughs in researching these catalysts and CNT manufacturing that enabled large-scale production.
Breakthroughs that happened after all the data the Patriots were covering up finally leaked.
It could not have happened without your help, Raiden. Science owes you a great debt. And I do as well. Working on your body has been quite educational.
Ugh.
I see you found the grenade.
Yeah, a new type. Intended for use against vehicles, UGs, and cyborgs.
Da. Shell design is first class. The charge, even carbon nanotube compound armor cannot fully block.
Sounds like we should keep...
Yes.
What? They don't work as promised?
No, the specs are... Well, if you want quality...
That much.
Triple the cost of...
And Desperado's got a bunch of them. I'd love to look at their annual budgets.
Most likely they have good relationship with manufacturer. I think they got insider price.
This'd be easier if we had a few more friends like that. So what about the US and Russia? What's their take on all this?
Well, America was never very friendly with Abkhazia or South Ossetia in the first place. And the Georgian government's a regional ally, so the US really has no cause to intervene. Russia wants the old government back, of course. The regime open to their influence. I doubt they'll opt for any large-scale action. Tensions with Georgia are running high already, but you can bet your ass they won't just sit on the sidelines. Boris has got a lot of connections in the Russian bureaucracy. Ex-military buddies. The Abkhaz are officially our clients, but I'm sure it's Russia that chose us. Maybe footing the bill, too. They can't use their actual special forces, so they call us instead. That's the beauty of PMCs.
We're not bound by the same rules as state-sponsored military.
Other countries would be outraged if the Russians went into places we can go freely. From our side, no state to answer to means we can run things as we see fit. By our own code, no compromises.
Then again, there's no one to say our code is what's right.
True. And opinions on that change from person to person, situation to situation. But you let your moral compass waver at all in this business, and real people pay the price. Money's always a factor, of course, but when it becomes the factor, that's when you got problems. The Montreux document lays out guidelines for what PMCs can and can't do, but there's no way to enforce it. A lot of people see that as the fatal flaw of the entire industry. After all, that's how we end up with rogue outfits like Desperado. Then again, it's also what leaves Maverick free to go after them. The industry has a bad rep, but it isn't good or bad itself. It's up to the morals of those who work in it. All we can do is what we think is right and try to lead by example. Anyway, sorry, you know how I am about this stuff. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Don't apologize. That's exactly why we took this job. Taking Sukumi back is the right thing to do.
Agreed. And now, that's all up to you, buddy.
Hey, Courtney. Have you ever tried Abkhazian cuisine?
Georgian, yes, but, I mean, I don't really know much about Abkhazia, so it'd be nice to try it, though, since we're this close and all.
Huh. Even you haven't tried it? Now I'm really curious.
What do you mean, even me?
Well, before we head to any new country, you always hit up local spots that serve their cuisine, right? You know, your little research trips.
Oh, come on. Not always. I just think it's interesting to compare local interpretations of ethnic food to the real thing. Plus, it's a great way to get familiar with a big part of any nation's culture. That's all.
Okay. But no time for research this time around, huh?
Well, like I said, I've had Georgian food before. And most of the Eastern Bloc sees Abkhazia as just another part of Georgia. But yeah, really tasty. They had this incredible cheese bread. Ugh, and the wine.
Georgian wine is famous after all, though I hear you won't find it in Russia.
They say most Abkhazian cuisine is closer to Turkish food than what you'll find in the rest of Georgia. Apparently only their wine resembles what they serve in Georgia.
Right then, allow me to give you a recap of vision.
Why? Is it different?
We'll get modern tech gives us the ability to display assorted information streams visually. This is accomplished by interrupting the data flow from a cyborg's optic nerves. This is referred to as AR, augmented reality.
That's how I can see my Soliton radar and who I'm talking to on the codec.
Right, but if too much data is presented in this manner, the user runs the risk of having an incomplete view of the real world.
Yeah, the codec window's got a bad habit of getting in the way when you drop into chat.
Of course. Typically, I'd simply call, leaving it to you whether or not to respond. In an emergency, however, that just wouldn't do.
Define emergency.
Anyway, cyborg AR designers try to keep the interface as unobtrusive as possible. But there are times when one really does need all that data on display. This is where augment mode comes in. Now, I know it sounds a bit like augmented reality, but just think of it as an additional dimension to AR.
Okay, fine. So what's it do?
It uses local Soliton radar and XIFF data to do things such as analyze and display enemy position and numbers. It also has a starlight scope and thermal goggle functionality for a host of night vision capabilities. The entire image is digitally processed, making it much easier to read than earlier thermal goggles.
Yeah, I'd noticed that.
Used in a well-lit area, your perceived brightness will be affected, but it won't hinder vision too much. The same type of sensor is used for all functionality. The data sent out by each one is merged together as part of the digital processing. All you need to worry about is turning the individual functions on and off. Simple, yes?
Sure, Doc. Simple. Dozaev. That woman.
Raiden, what's happening? Your heart rate spiked.
Yeah, I just dodged a bullet. All right, I'm heading for the refinery. Boris, I got a visual on Dozaev and Mistral. Looked like they were arguing over something. Mistral's heading up the force at the refinery, correct? We're sure on that?
Yes, but I'm not sure how good a commander she is. As a fighter, talented, yes, I know, but...
Well, neither one looked very happy. Maybe she'll withdraw.
Oh, I doubt that. She may not like him, but she will follow her orders. She is just the leader on the ground here, I think. Someone else is calling the shots behind cover.
All right. But what's the end game here? Say I die and we can't stop them. Then what? Are they even capable of forming a real government? Do they think the people here would support Dozaev?
Good questions, Tovarich. History shows it is a much easier thing to take a government than to keep it. An unpopular regime can only ignore the will of the people for so long before they rise up. And trying to do all this with PMC soldiers? Difficult. And very, very expensive.
Someone else must be bankrolling this for their own reasons. Someone with very deep pockets. Who stands to benefit the most from all this?
Most likely someone with an interest in that refinery. The plant has pipelines connecting with Sochi in Russia and Supsa in Georgia. Crude oil from the Caspian Sea is refined in Sukhumi and then sent on to Russia.
Oil. I wonder if Dozaev knows he's being used. Then again, I wonder if he'd even care. You get all that, Kev? The woman with Dozaev. That's Mistral?
Yep, the only female member of the Winds of Destruction. The name is from a cold, dry regional wind in France that blows from the Alps down to the Mediterranean.
She French?
Yep. Born in Algeria, though. It was a French colony until they declared independence in the early 60s. Haha, but you already knew that.
Yeah. They were the last French colony in Africa.
You know your history. Plenty of French colonial families still live there. Billets noirs, they're called.
I've heard the term. The main character in that Camus novel, The Stranger, was one.
You also find a lot of Algerians who've immigrated to France, although they put a stop to that a while ago.
Yeah. A lot of European countries seem to be clamping down on immigration lately.
Mistral joined the Foreign Legion to get her citizenship.
A woman legionnaire?
And not the first. There was one that served in the North Africa campaign during World War II. Anyway, Mistral's been doing PMC work ever since her Legion discharge. We're not sure why she went cyborg. She's officially leading the force at the refinery, but she is also a combatant. I don't have anything on her combat style, but do not underestimate her. The Winds of Destruction are trained killers, all of them. They didn't let her in because of her looks.
I don't need a reminder. I won't let my guard down.
Yeah, but, speaking of her looks, she's got, well, I mean, a couple of, huge... Look, just don't get distracted, okay?
Sounds like you should take your own advice there, Kev.
Raiden, you need to save?
Did you catch all that? With Dolzaev and Mistral?
Yeah, I was monitoring the whole time. Dolzaev's not really what I expected. I've seen his file, plenty of photos, but I guess I expected someone more, I don't know, threatening?
Didn't seem too friendly to me.
No, I mean, you hear terrorist, you think of some cold, calculating professional. Dolzaev looks more like some guy off the street.
Cold, calculating professional types don't usually bother with terrorism. It's too risky. Most terrorists are ordinary people, radicalized one way or another.
Yeah, I guess so.
Of course, that doesn't make what they do any easier to forgive. What about Mistral? What'd you think?
Well, she's certainly attractive. Probably an artificial face, though. I'm guessing most of her is artificial.
Roger that.
Raiden, the Mistral woman. Is she truly a full-body cyborg?
That's what the intel says, at least. Why? You noticed something?
Indeed. Two somethings, in fact. Based on their movements, her chest region did not appear to be artificial.
You can tell that just from what I saw?
Indeed. After some detailed image analysis, I am 80% certain that is her own natural torso. If it is indeed a cyborg chassis, it is the most advanced I've ever seen. Such technology would not come cheap. It would mean whoever is backing Desperado is likely quite wealthy.
Probably so. As far as Mistral goes, it really doesn't matter to me. Natural, synthetic, man, woman, an enemy is an enemy.
Ah, are you not even the least bit curious?
What do you think Dolzaev and that woman were discussing? Even your ears could...
No. Even enhanced hearing...
A pity they were outdoors. We could have deployed laser surveillance unit if...
Yeah. Maybe if... And there's the problem of...
Duh, true enough.
Anyway, better I just head over there and wrap this...
Of course. I only wonder because I have no idea. The more intel we have...
Relax, Boris. Once I...
Let us hope.
So, Kev, what... I mean, obviously refining oil.
Skip that week in science class, huh?
Just the basics. They take
Well, yeah.
naphtha.
the raw material. Crude oil's used for a lot more than just fuel, you know. These days, it's the core component of just about every chemical product.
Okay.
Crude contains a lot of molecular hydrocarbons and impurities. The refinery distills and extracts these hydrocarbons at their different boiling points. Once the impurities are removed, what's left can be used to make gasoline and so on.
Right. So, pretty much exactly what I said in the first place.
Oh, well, if you know all this already, I guess we're done here.
I could use a bit more detail on.
All right, cool then. Kevin out.
So Mistral's from have you ever been?
No.
Once, for a consulting.
I hear it's pretty safe there now.
Yeah, pretty nice spot for a bit. 80% of it's the Saharan desert, and wow, it was just like you'd imagine. So much sand. You could easily imagine camel caravans trekking beneath the early evening moon. It was like something from another world.
Yeah? I thought only a sixth of the Sahara was sandy like that. The French carried out a bunch of nuclear tests there too, I remember.
But once you reach the Mediterranean coast, it's a totally different place. All these white-walled buildings framed against intense blue sea. It's a really stark contrast.
Were you in Algiers? I know that the capital looks a lot like that.
Yep. The local cuisine's totally French-influenced. I'll never forget this one lunch near my hotel. A baguette sandwich and a café au lait. Simple and simply unforgettable. Oh, there were a bunch of sweet shops in town too. High-quality European candy, but so cheap.
Sounds like you ate your way across the country.
Well, food's an important part of local culture, you know. Oh, and speaking of which, the seafood. I didn't expect to see Mediterranean fish in African cuisine, but it was also fresh and flavorful. They'd fry up small fish whole, then drizzle them with lemon juice. I could have eaten that all day.
Sounds like a lot of calories.
I tried to stay active, you know.
Hey, did you know my visual analyzers can tell me how much someone weighs?
Yeah, I'll have to talk with Doc about disabling that one.
My apologies, Raiden. I realize we never concluded our discussion on carbon nanotube muscle fibers.
Didn't we?
CNT drove major innovations in the field of cybernetics, not to mention unmanned gears. As I'm sure you are aware, Walker-type UGs require numerous linear actuators in order to function. Previously, organic polymers or cultivated muscle cells were used to that purpose. But the advancement of CNT technology allowed for comparable power in a far more compact package. This meant the same size UGs could be equipped with even greater firepower. Take the redesigned Metal Gear Ray, for example.
They took all the space the old artificial muscles filled up and stuffed it with weapons.
Precisely. Of course, UGs have improved in many ways, all to keep pace with cyborg advancements, you know. After all, the original Metal Gear program was designed to unite infantry and weaponry. As an evolution of this concept, the UG is now in direct competition with the cyborg. And the cyborgs already have an advantage with their maneuverability and smaller size, as you well know. Of course, UGs are not dependent on the skills of a human host.
Long story short, watch out for UGs.
Well, yes, basically. Cyborgs have matched unmanned gears in many respects, but then UG tech advances every day. Do not underestimate any you might run into.
Copy that.
We intercepted call for backup during your last fight. The caller's position is on your Soliton radar. You can engage if you wish. It is your choice.
Didn't you say you'd been here before, Boris?
Once, back when it was still
Seems like it'd be a lovely place.
the Pearl of the Black Sea, they called it, back when more Russians lived there. It was a very popular resort spot for the USSR. This is before the wall fell, of course. Then Russia and Georgia began to fight over the area.
Kicking off the war in the early 90s.
Georgia was a Soviet republic. Abkhazia a semi-autonomous state within it. The Soviets liked to stoke ethnic rivalries between the two. And not just there, in all the outlying territories. It kept them easier to control.
But with the Russians no longer watching over the two.
Duh. The Abkhaz were scared. They knew an independent Georgia would swallow their nation sooner or later. So they took advantage of a Georgian military coup to declare their own independence in '92. Of course, the new Georgian government was not happy to hear this, and so...
The same old story.
And with Russia supporting the Abkhaz, it was a stalemate. 2 years later, the ceasefire meant Abkhazia was finally independent, but not officially. They still are not formally recognized by Georgia, or most of the international community.
This region is filled with breakaway states.
This is true. There is South Ossetia, also in Georgia. Transnistria in East Moldova, and Nagorno-Karabakh, which broke from Azerbaijan. In any case, even Russia did not officially recognize Abkhazia as independent until 2008. So it was not long ago Sukhumi was a war zone. It has changed dramatically since then. They have been rebuilding steadily, with Russian support, ever since SOP was shut down.
Good to hear. But doesn't that leave them wrapped around Russia's little finger?
It does. Which is why Dolzaev is calling for a truly independent state. He wants an Abkhazia that takes orders from no one. Not Georgia, not Moscow.
Sounds like a worthy cause.
Duh. But many Abkhaz are happy with the reconstruction Russian support makes possible. Few of his fellow countrymen were interested in what Dolzaev had to say. At first.
And then Desperado showed up.
Exactly. They brought the sad ending to this little history lesson. It is no wonder so many people mistrust PMCs, eh?
I suppose not. We always talk about the Montreux document, but why hasn't anyone made it legally binding?
People are trying to, both inside and outside the industry, but it's easier said than done. Even with 17 countries on board, it's still just a set of guidelines. They'd need to negotiate an actual treaty based on that agreement for it to become official. And we both know getting everyone to sign on wouldn't be easy.
Yeah. Every government's for regulating PMCs until it restricts how they can use them themselves.
It gets complicated when you try to put it all in exact legal terms, too. A treaty would need to distinguish a PMC's home nation, the one it's active in, and the one that contracted it. Then you have the industry itself, which isn't exactly thrilled at the prospect of greater regulation. There's just so many different parties involved, and everyone's got their own motivations. So yeah, long story short, we're a long way from getting anything legally binding anytime soon.
Sorry I asked. How are things back at Control, Courtney?
Things? Things are fine. Same as usual, I guess. Russia is... Russia. Not that I've left HQ much to see anything, really.
No concerns about security? Isn't that a civilian airport you're stationed at?
Sochi International, yeah. But we're fine. We have our own cyborg detail on the job. Plus, any trouble and we can just take off. Literally. One of the perks of housing your HQ in a giant transport plane, I guess. Now, if anyone wanted to mess up this op, they'd have a much easier time coming after you directly.
I'm not so sure. Have you seen this new body in action? It's amazing. It's ready for anything. Unless they...
Oh, Raiden, yeah. Your body? It's so amazing.
Very funny. Yeah, you know what I meant.
Oh, is it getting hot in here? Or is that just your body in action?
All right, all right. If you're done, I'm going to get back to the mission.
Okay, I'll stop.
Thanks.
For a guy with a bod like yours, anytime.
Doc, all the UG talk got me thinking. Why don't we see more manned gears?
Ah, yes, with a pilot. The bipedal tanks and such things, I must confess I have not followed the field closely as of late. But then, who has? Since MGRR, all the advances and the funding in mobile artillery has been UGs.
So why is that?
Well, UGs take many more forms. Aerial drones, treaded tanks, armored transports. And they are perfect for the 3D work. Jobs too dull, too dirty, or too dangerous for men. True Metal Gears with a pilot and nuclear payload were huge and very expensive. They were not practical. It turned out the greater need was for smaller, cheaper units, deployed more easily and in greater numbers. So the field narrowed in on this aspect of gear design, an all-terrain link between infantry and artillery. But even then, the UG models were more popular. In most cases, they simply made more sense.
But aren't there situations where you'd want gear-level power, but also a human pilot there to make decisions? UG AI has gotten better, but it's still terrible at handling anything unexpected.
But Raiden, this is exactly the role the cyborg has taken. On the manned gear, any advantage over a cyborg in offensive power comes with a matching increase in size. This makes it so large as to no longer be practical for most infantry missions. Conversely, the smaller models are so close to cyborgs that, well, what is the point?
Cyborgs are smaller, cheaper, more nimble.
Precisely. Perhaps soon we will see the cyborg take the place of the UG, as the UG has done to the manned gear.
What, with wings? Scooting around on wheels?
Why do you laugh? It is the logical next step to have a human brain integrated into a tank or a plane.
Now you're getting into some B-grade sci-fi territory, Doc.
Oh, but it is all quite possible, I assure you. Just consider the possibilities. A humanoid friend for everyday life, yes, but the brainstem can be easily extracted and inserted into whatever chassis best suits the mission. So, yes, I suppose the paradigm could be flipped on its head. As UGs become smaller and smarter, they could begin to fill the cyborg's role. They will come to resemble them more and more in form and function, no doubt. I suppose at some point they would no longer be UGs, but androids. Glorious! Up above you!
Boris, do we have anything else on Dulce?
Very little. He claims he was part of the Chechen National Congress when they declared this was just after the famous coup at Gorbachev lost his political power. It was Yeltsin who signed the Belavezha Accords.
Right. It created the Commonwealth of Independent States. All republics that made up the USSR became independent.
The problem is, Chechnya was never a true republic. It was an autonomous state, but still part of the Russian Republic.
Like how Abkhazia was an autonomous state within the Georgian Republic.
Duh. The same kind of sad story. Russia does not recognize Chechnya as independent. They send troops and the fighting begins. It is said 250,000 Chechens were killed over the 2 wars that followed. 1/4 the entire population. The Chechens were forced to give in, and the war officially ended.
But the rebels kept on fighting.
Insurgents fled into Caucasus Mountains, formed several factions. They waged guerrilla war on Russia ever since. We think Doltsev is the leader of just such a rebel group.
Sounds like Russia bears some of the blame for radicalizing him and his men.
I love my homeland, but she is not perfect. What nation is? Just remember, this could all be smoke. We cannot even confirm Doltsev is truly ethnic Chechen.
Say he is, though. What would he be after here in Abkhazia?
Some Chechen militants volunteered to fight for the Abkhaz in their war in the early 90s. But when Russia recognized Abkhazia to keep Georgia in check, they also began funding recovery.
Which the Dolzaev crowd see as a play to gain influence. But wasn't the Chechen recovery funded by Russia?
Duh. And many rebels believe this is why their people gave up on independence. Perhaps this is exactly why Dolzaev is here, to alert the people before it can happen again. But if the Abkhaz people are not interested in fighting, his plan could backfire.
So in a way, it's Russian policy that brought him here. He thinks he's fighting to make these people free.
Whatever his motives, no one elected him and no one gave him a permit for murder. Now that he is allied with Desperado, he is too dangerous to ignore.
Hey Kev, that piece of shit who killed Enmani, is he one of those almighty winds?
Yeah. Goes by Sundowner. It's a folk name for this warm air current in Southern California. He's also, well, not the formal head of Desperado, but pretty much their de facto leader. Let's see. Born in Alabama, family was poor. Solid student, decent grades, but no money for college, so he joined the army. Says he fought in Panama in '89, then Iraq again, Afghanistan. In 2008, he drops out of the service and starts doing merc work for various PMCs. He was active all through the SOP years. Built up quite a reputation. Apparently, the Sundowner handle comes from all the... Anyway, an IED put him out of action for a few years. But then, Cyborg... The Army investigated him for possible war crimes. A few times. Hey, come on, buddy. You know that's not fair. You were just a kid. You didn't know what you... And it's not like they gave you...
Yeah. Thanks, Kev.
By the way, I picked up something interesting on that tilt rotor back in Africa.
Desperado's getaway vehicle? What do you got?
I traced its registration. It comes up as a, get this, mail transport, a Somali civilian helicopter.
Not even the right type of aircraft. So the registration is fake. Well, par for the course for Desperado, I guess.
I wonder why they bothered with the tilt rotor in the first place.
Why not? They can take off and land without an airstrip, virtually anywhere. Hover, too. Meanwhile, they have the speed and range of a fixed-wing plane, or close to it. And they're quiet. You don't get all that BVI noise from the blades like with a normal copter.
Aren't they more accident-prone, though?
They were. Used to call them Widowmakers. The rotor tech is really complex. There've been a lot of mishaps over the years, but each one's helped perfect the design. These days, they're as safe as any other aircraft, helicopter or fixed wing. Most of VTOL's bad rep is left over from the thrust vectoring jets of the past.
Ah, no wonder you know all this. Says here you took down a Harrier once. Wait, by yourself?
Well, I did have a rocket launcher. Wasn't so tough while it was in hover mode.
I bet you're just being modest. Must have been a pretty crazy op you were on.
You don't know the half of it. One thing about fighting these cyborgs, Doctor.
Oh?
I can slice them to pieces, and with all their pain, and at least against SOP troops, you never forgot they were real people. But these cyborgs, it starts to feel like I'm taking on unmanned gears, robots, not living, breathing men.
Intriguing. Tell me, does it help assuage the natural feelings of guilt? There is no reason to avoid this topic. Man has wrestled with it as long as there has been war. Guns were a huge step, of course, as it became easier to take a life, physically and mentally. Then, destroying a tank or airplane, where you no longer had to see your enemy's face as he perished. Eventually, remote-controlled drones further distanced the killer from his victim, much like the video games. I suppose cyborg soldiers could be seen as yet another step in dehumanizing death.
Maybe. I do feel like I could forget I'm taking the lives of real people here.
Well, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't necessarily be taking their lives, strictly speaking. So, as long as the brain is supplied with oxygen, a cyborg can survive most anything, even if respiration is disabled. An emergency supply of liquid oxygen would remain in the bloodstream. The cyborg would enter a state of hibernation, yes. But so long as the brainstem were retrieved intact, it could be attached to another body and revived.
That's how the two Gemini survived.
The Gemini? Ah, yes, the twin cyborgs from the motorcade.
But Desperado cyborgs are different.
Physical self-destruction is a fail-safe security measure. In any case, it is unfortunate that Prime Minister Nmane was human. Perhaps if he had been a cyborg, he might have survived as well.
We'll never know. Besides, a robotic prime minister? I doubt anyone would accept that. Inside or outside the country.
Yes, I suppose fear always does trump logic when it comes to the general public.
Exactly.
Right. The cliff is just ahead at the end of the old city. Beyond that is the refinery's backyard.
So what? It's a sheer drop? The refinery's not connected to the city at all?
No, it was only built 2 years ago. There should be a narrow path around there that leads to the plant. It is protected by a fence, but probably you can cut your way through.
Probably.
Don't get cocky. Most likely it is Desperado running security down there. Good. That's the back. I see a door there, but can you use the ventilator?
You mean that huge...
Just
Hey, so, about the refinery.
Copy that. So, like I was saying, the tallest building on site is that all the crude oil runs through there first. Lighter components with low boiling points are removed at the top of the heaviest fuel oil, then has the lighter oils and naphtha that distillation didn't remove taken out. Fluid catalytic cracking is what they call it. Other than that, let's see. There's equipment to remove sulfur, a cooling tower to dispose of all the water used. Oh, and the flare stack to eliminate gas waste. You see that thing with flames shooting out the top? That's the stack.
It's burning the gas off?
Yeah, burns it up completely, rendering it harmless. Kinda hypnotic if you stare at it a while, huh? Next door you have a power plant. And of course the gas tanks. Liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, is pressurized and stored in those round tanks. It's also artificial, but it's got a certain charm, you know? Like the ultimate in utilitarian beauty. A solitary distillation tower, all lit up and set against the setting sun. It's an amazing sight.
Kev, you still with me there?
What? You don't appreciate this kind of stuff? Places like Germany and Japan, people get really into it. Factory sightseeing tours and everything.
Yeah. No, not so much.
Brighton, something I meant to ask in our last chat. Did you consider opting for emotion restraints? I can understand one might be leery of the procedure, but it is all perfectly reversible, I assure you. You could implement them for a mission and then do away with them as soon as it was over.
I'll pass, thanks. To be honest, I have a problem with the whole concept.
And what is that?
Decisions are about more than just logic. Lose your emotions, and you risk not being able to relate to how normal people see right and wrong. Your conscience could end up different, warped, or who knows, maybe gone altogether. Boris agrees. That's why no Maverick cyborgs are allowed to use emotion restraints.
An understandable perspective. There is some data to support your belief. MRI scans have isolated the brain activity associated with choosing between good and bad. Mostly in the dorsolateral prefrontal and central orbitofrontal cortexes, to be precise. But this entire area of the brain is known to process emotion, not logical thought. It would seem to support the idea that emotion indeed plays a role in values-based decisions.
Well, there you go.
But another argument can be made, that it is emotion that sparks human conflict in the first place. All the great wars, all the great atrocities, would they have happened if not for emotional decisions?
Maybe not. But we can't just ignore the worldview of most of the planet. We don't exist in a vacuum here. To most of the world, a PMC operating on its own guidelines would be like a terrorist organization. They'd say we used brute force to impose our strange values on others. And they'd be right.
Yes, well, you have a point.
Abuse of emotion restraints has become a hot topic. Suppressing fear tends to boost aggression, which has led to cases of excessive violence.
True, achieving the right balance is difficult.
But on the other hand, it makes it possible to intentionally make people more aggressive. Even a child can become a bomb just waiting to explode.
Yes, it is very likely that Desperado is employing just such a technique.
Raiden, what you said before about your sword being a tool of justice, I just want to say I agree 100%.
Glad to hear you say that.
You mentioned it was part of...
Yeah. I didn't grow up using a sword. After that, I decided to train with the HF blade. I studied a lot of samurai techniques. I really got into it. Started learning more. I tore through stacks of books, movies.
Somehow hard to imagine.
What? A cyborg can't have hobbies? I'll have you know I'm actually a huge movie buff.
Okay, okay. So that's where you picked up this Sword of Justice creed?
Yeah. Most of it from a single master named Munenori Yagyu. He founded a school of swordsmanship on the idea that violence can be necessary for the greater good. He called it Katsujinken, the life-giving sword. Yagyu believed power isn't evil in itself. It's how it's applied that matters. As time went on, Katsujinken incorporated deterrence. It took on the meaning of winning without fighting. Or as I like to say, one sword keeps another in the sheath. That's from George Herbert. He was an English priest, 17th century, almost the same era as Yagyu.
So you...
You could frame the same message as use of a necessary evil, but I think it's a good mindset for any PMC.
At least as long as there's fighting that requires us in the first place.
Which doesn't seem likely to change anytime soon.